Good evening. I would like to call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Finance for Monday, September 16th, 2019 to order. First item on the agenda is public forum. Anybody wishing to address the board in public forum? Seeing none. Item number 2, approve minutes of our regular meeting minutes from August 19th, 2019. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion, corrections, edits?
Just wondering, it's not a correction, just wondering on 2.1 if we have a schedule on the facilities task force yet. You said that you thought they were going to schedule a public presentation this month.
Actually, that would be Matt. Do you know Facilities Task Force, if they have a date in mind?
They do. I think it's October 2nd or 3rd? 3rd. October 3rd.
October 3rd?
Yes. 7:30 at the community center.
Excellent. Thank you.
Here, rather. We are here.
Okay. I had one item on page 5 under medical, under the motion. I'm not sure who seconded the motion, but I'm pretty sure it was not Ms. Malvasi. I know you could try, but yeah, but it won't float. So I'm not sure who seconded, but okay. I'm sure it was basically just a typo. That's the only thing I saw in the notes, in the minutes. Anybody else have anything?
Move their acceptance.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Thank you. Correspondence, item number 3, Standing Building Committee minutes. So I was going through these, and I found interesting that they had a member of the building committee that was supposed to be at our meeting last month and was not able to make it, and then there was supposed to be someone for this month, and I don't see anybody. So I guess if anybody has any questions, my recommendation would be, I mean, we could discuss it obviously, but if there's any questions that need to get back to the building committee, you can forward them to me or forward them directly to the chair and have them answer it. I did have one item, and it was actually something that I probably should know, but I'll ask Mary Jane on item number 5, or actually Linda may know too, or Ted, who I just saw Ted Sands walked in, and I know you go to a lot of the building committee meetings. So review and discuss possible action or approval for the town hall phase 2 air conditioning system. There were 2 projects that were discussed. I was just curious, were those air conditioning system projects, or are those bonded projects, those capital? Those are those? I didn't have a chance to look at the capital reports and see what was in there for line items in the where the money was coming from for the.
We have bonded money for energy projects,
Okay.
and those large projects would come out of that particular funding.
Out of the energy project.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Not the energy performance
Not
contract.
not the EPC.
The bonded
Not the
line
EPC,
item
but the
for
bonded
energy
energy.
projects. Just want to be clear, it's 2 different things.
Okay. That was the only thing I couldn't quite remember. I didn't see anything else in the building committee. Ken, you had something?
Yeah, I have something on items 5 and 6. They, but one is an extension of the other. They went ahead and waived the bidding process, and it was about $100,000 involved in those 2 projects. The town hall, which was, I believe, about $73,000, and then the police department HVAC, another $33,000 and $13,000. It was over $100,000, and they have just waived the bidding process and granted that to Train. And I wondered whether that was conventional or why there was any reason for waiving the bidding
I
process.
remember reading
The
something.
Board of Selectmen this morning approved that waiver because the equipment is Train manufactured equipment. Anyone who would be able to work on that needs to hire a Train certified mechanics, and there's traditionally an uplift on that over going directly to a train. It's classically called proprietary, and historically, we've gotten much better rates just going directly to train.
Train equipment.
Yeah, it's train equipment, so we go directly to them.
So we accepted their evaluation and.
Yes, we did.
And
And we
the
approved,
waiver.
this morning, the Board of Selectmen approved the waiver and the awarding of the contract.
Okay, anything else on building committee?
Just as the field, there was a question about determining the proper levels of fill. Had any action been taken on that? I realized the meeting was just a few weeks ago, but they were gonna determine the appropriate amount of turf on the new, or fill on the new turf.
Oh,
What about that?
It's currently being negotiated by our council on that project. There were there was testing done, and it was not consistently to the levels of specification that were specified. So we're working with the contractors, as you may recall. This was a mediated settlement, so we are working through that mediation process with multiple providers that are the multiple contractors that are involved.
Is the field in use now?
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
So that they can-
The challenges are being able to certify that that there are no liabilities associated with these minor discrepancies. So there are a host of legal concerns that we need to button down.
We're not going to be responsible for any of the costs.
other than our consultant?
No.
Other than a consultant and legal costs, that's correct.
okay. Anything else, building committee? If not, moving on, pension committee minutes. I think I had more of a clarification or a question on page 2. Actually, let me look at the numbers here so I get it clear, because it's a little bit. Under the finance director's report, the draft OPEB IPS, there's a couple of different comments. It says that the BOF will be looking at the BOE medical fund inclusion into the OPEB. It's not BOE, it's the Board of Ed and the town. It's not just the Board of Ed that's being isolated.
Well, part of the discussion is whether or not the Board of Ed will be included, because they do not have a direct liability for their OPEB, just an implicit liability. So it's possible that just the town will be part of the actual OPEB trust.
It's just the way it's worded. It looks like it's the Board of Ed medical fund. There's an inclusion in the next sentence is currently the Board of Education medical fund is a $5 million surplus. It's not the Board of Ed's medical. It's combined. It's
The
town and Board
right,
of Ed.
it's just
So
how it's worded. Yeah.
I'm not trying to correct the minutes. I just want to make sure it makes sense that there's still an inclusion issue with the Board of Ed and how that's going to work. That's what the meeting, there was going to be a meeting.
We're keeping the Board of Ed in the medical fund.
Yes, yeah, that'd be a wise move, yes.
And just as a point of reference, I believe you were invited to a meeting.
Which was supposed to be today.
Which you were disinvited to, owing to the fact that our attorney, Shipman and Goodman, had raised some concerns because they are already engaged with the Board of Education
Okay.
on OPEB discussions and development. And in order to represent two parties, we need agreement, a formal agreement between the two parties.
Okay.
Theoretically, legally, we represent two different clients. They represent two different clients, and as Jeff could tell you, there's potential for conflict of interest there, and the appropriate waivers need to be signed.
So there's a possibility that there could be two separate OPEB
No.
trusts? Or no?
No.
Okay.
No, both parties have to agree to put it into
No.
one.
No, there will only be one OPEB trust. The issue is whether or not the Board of Ed will be part of it.
Okay.
It may just be the town. The issue with on the legal end is that the Shipman and Goodwin already represents the Board of Ed, and now they would be representing
I see.
the trust, which is a combined effort. even though the Board of Ed may not contribute to it, the pension and, medical and all of that is combined. So we just have to get through the legal paperwork before we can hold the meeting that we were gonna have that I spoke of last month.
I see. But Shipman's representation of the Board of Ed isn't with relation to an OPEB trust, it's just other matters that they've represented
It's
the
just
Board
in
of Ed
general,
on.
yes.
Right, okay.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on pension committee?
Question on 6.7. So copies of the final draft for the police contracts, did they go to the Board of Selectmen? Did they approve it yet? For
What
the
item number?
6.7 for the
Police retirement
police
fund?
retirement fund?
Yes, it has already been approved by the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, so that's done.
That's all done, yep. It was agreed upon between the union and the town, and then it went approval through the selectmen.
And that documentation was prepared by our advisors, as well as reviewed and approved by outside counsel.
And was there a similar amendment that involved the firefighters?
Yes, there's another amendment coming that has to do with the firefighters.
And does that have to go through their union too?
Yes, this is basically what they're doing is any changes to the pension that are negotiated in contracts need to eventually be codified in the pension plan itself.
Right.
And that's what this effort
Okay.
is to clean up the language in the pension plan to reflect what has been agreed to in contract negotiations. Believe me, the individuals who take advantage of pension opportunities, they're very familiar with what the most recent versions are, regardless of the language that is in the pension document itself.
Okay, great.
But going forward, it sounds to me like that's going to be more of a housekeeping issue where we incorporate the changes that are.
You're absolutely right, and I have instructed our HR director that we are not to be caught in the same position where we are making up for a couple of previous contracts and having to go to this level and length. It is my expectation that these restatements and/or amendments are done within 6 months of the settlement of any contract.
It would make it easier from the town's perspective, certainly, while it's still fresh in everyone's mind.
Right.
What the agreement was
Easier for
to just
everyone.
incorporate
Right.
it.
Mhm.
Right.
And actually, we use Milliman to do the analysis of the contract, any changes to the contract as it relates to the pension. Milliman makes their recommendations. The recommendations come back to us and outside counsel. Outside counsel had been Mike Dorney for many, many years until his retirement recently. But he would weigh in and and render an opinion on the efficacy of the work that Milliman prepared. So there's a couple of checkpoints there.
Okay, anything else on the minutes? Or on the investment report, which seemed to be a good month? At least for August, right? July?
Yeah.
July.
That's because the town and the Board of Ed made their contribution, so that was the majority of the increase.
Yeah, it's about 2.6. Okay. Okay, if nothing else, we can move on. Item number 4, review and accept report of expenditures for the Board of Education for August 2019. Linda and Ted Sands.
Get me going.
Welcome.
Thank you. Let me start by saying that I was not the reviewer. I am just the,
You're standing.
I'm the pitch.
There's a lot of different names, but
Relief pitcher.
you're here. That's all that
Yeah.
matters. Thank you, Ted, for coming.
Okay. Expenditures for the month of August were $4,401,289, which expenditures and encumbrances through the end of August were 14.3% of the budget as compared to 12.84 last year. We're happy to discuss that difference, but suffice it to say that that is primarily timing differences. We got on top of several annual payments this year and made them on a timely basis. The warrants for the year, for the month, were $2,288,640.87. And I would be happy, Linda and I would be happy to discuss any of the details with respect to this.
I'll start with the questions. Just purchase services, legal and security seem to be running higher. Security, I'm assuming, not good to assume, so I just looked at encumbrances. There's not much there. So I was just wondering why that might be running security a little bit. Is that a timing issue with payments? And then on legal services, when it runs high earlier in the year, not sure if there's any concern on that.
Well, legal is the negotiations for the custodians
Okay.
and the teachers, that it's ongoing. So that's driving it, and then special education.
Mm-hmm.
Security was, that was for purchase for, I believe it was Elite, but I'll double check, for the door access system. It was a purchase for one of the schools. I'll confirm which school. I don't
Yeah, it's not a
remember
very
off the top
large
of-
amount. It's
Yeah.
22,000
But it
for
was
security.
it was
but-
a
yeah.
capital expenditure.
The capital, okay.
And then what was the other?
It was legal
That's-
and
that's it.
security. That's just those two for now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ken?
I wouldn't, I wouldn't, we'll see about the legal.
Okay.
It's hard to predict what our legal expenses are going to be in these contract negotiations, and some of these have been a little more protracted than we expected.
Mhm.
And secondarily, with the special education litigation is kind of lumpy. And if we get a couple of thorny cases, then that gets a little bigger than you budget. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm noting it more just for tracking purposes than, it's 2 months in,
Right.
so we know it varies, but just seemed a little bit high. And just wanted to bring it to your attention, which I'm sure you already know.
Yes.
Ken?
Yeah, I had a question about travel and building and grounds. They're up higher too. Is that just timing? They're going through 80% of the budget on building and grounds. Is that
Well, there's
well under control
a
for the year?
lot encumbered.
There's a lot of encumbrances
There's
in there.
$500,000 encumbered, so that's setting
It's
everything up for the
just setting
year.
everything up for the
Yeah.
year. It's all the anticipated testing, compliance
Right,
things that we
for
have
the-
to
for
do,
the
all
year.
all the anticipated
probably,
stuff for the work.
One question I want to raise. You had a line added, you said in your note, on the budget process for tutors.
Yes.
Could you distinguish between tutors and coaches?
So a coach works with, you're talking like the instructional coaches? So an instructional coach works directly with the teachers to help improve the teacher. They do professional development directly with the teachers. A tutor goes to help a student. So it's whether the student is homebound, whether for whatever reason the student needs additional help, the tutors are brought in, and it's not always current staff, it's a retired teacher, it could be somebody else who's qualified to be a tutor. So they're not really a certified teacher, that's why we moved them out of the teachers line, and part of it, some of them were charged to paraprofessionals, some were charged to teachers. So I'm trying to gather all the costs for tutors in one location.
So
And that's
tutors is,
that's 140,000 for the year.
Yes.
and that was before in the teacher line item?
Part, yes, so
Yeah,
some
I'm
of it.
just trying to
Right, so
yeah.
it's part of it, some of it was budgeted
Mhm.
under paraprofessionals.
Mhm.
But then there was some that was being charged to teachers, so in order to
Okay.
make it cleaner, I just moved it all into one
Good idea.
own line
Yeah,
by itself.
Okay. No,
Okay.
it makes sense. It's good to see it separate. Okay.
And then, Ken, I do want to apologize, I brought the invoices that you
We can
questioned.
do it later, it's okay.
And I apologize, they're sitting on
okay.
my desk along with my notebook that I forgot to bring too. So
okay.
I will send them to you tomorrow.
All right.
I can tell you what they were for.
No, it's okay. It's just
I will
it was
send
just
them-
random things.
I'll send them
You'll-
to Nick.
Okay, so question went to you, and then you'll
Yes.
send it to the board. Okay, that's fine. That's great.
And I do apologize for that.
Okay,
Not a problem.
thank you.
Substitute
Anyone else?
teachers are off
Go
to a
ahead.
good start.
I hope it stays that way.
After one day of school.
Yeah, right.
I'd like to see it at 5% after one day of
Two.
school.
2 days.
We could just move right through anything on warrants or the minutes.
I do.
Go ahead, Veronica.
I just had a question on the warrants. There's two separate items for Power School. And I
Yes.
just wondered why they aren't lumped together. One is for the high school and one is for everybody else. On
Page 9 of the warrants.
page 9 of the warrants.
So it's really not for the high school. One of the bills is for the actual software user license. One bill is for the hosting of the server and hosting the software so that we don't have to maintain it. They host it, they back it up, they do all the updates as needed for security reasons. So it's not for the high school. It's a wrong description that I didn't catch.
Well, is HS for home server?
Must be.
I'm sorry,
I took it as meaning the high school.
I-
Must
and-
be host.
I would have thought that too.
I probably looked at
Yeah.
it and at the time knew what it was and now.
Because right
I
above it
forget
is HS athletic supplies, so just kind of looks, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good
I
clarification.
had a temporary person entering invoices because I was shorthanded all summer. So that person tended to put different descriptions in than I would normally see.
Yeah. And then there's an invoice on page 12, a company I hadn't seen before, Tecogen.
Tecogen.
I'm sorry?
Tecogen.
Tecogen?
They make the Tecogen is a system where we reclaim energy and generate electricity out of it at the high school. And that system is maintained by Tecogen. So this is a periodic maintenance that they come and do.
So this is under what category building? Did it say that?
No.
Where's that tracked? Because it's
Would that be service to machines?
about 12, I
Um,
just left the page by accident here.
Yeah, it's-
Because it's about 13,000 a year, monthly maintenance.
that most likely would go to building maintenance.
Right.
But
Yeah.
double check. I would say building maintenance is
Yeah.
where it is. It's,
Could you find out where that is, where it falls? I'm just curious that it falls under, is it under purchase services? Is it building management, upkeep, service? I'm just wondering where that would be found.
which warrant?
Any other questions?
Yeah. Page 1. I see we have $300,000 for the Giant Steps program.
Yes.
What does that cover?
Those are, it's essentially two tuition payments, and they're, for Giant Steps, they're annual payments.
Annual.
Yeah. That's not customary, but that's the deal that we have with them.
Also on page 1, there's an item for a Jones ventilator unit for $5,600. Is that an emergency replacement, or is that a budgeted aspect of the repairs to the building? Do we know?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I can
Well,
find out for
there's a
you.
number of them
Although-
ahead of that say repairs or.
Although the invoice was from January of this year, so could have been something that was done earlier.
I would say, given that we've got all the stuff that's gone on at Jones in that HVAC system, my guess is that that was some sort of an emergency repair. It would look like it's an equipment failure.
Yeah.
We'll double check. I think it was, and I think that's why they forgot to bill us.
Okay. Yeah, the date
Surprise.
was kind of a
Yeah,
giveaway,
little
but.
surprises. And to answer your question, Tecogen is under building maintenance.
Building maintenance. Thank you.
HD Seeger, is that the insurance carrier?
Yeah.
Yes. The student accident insurance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything in the minutes?
I just have one more question on the warrants.
Keep going. Yeah, no.
On there was the Institute for Learning. There was
Yes.
the math coaching contract. Is that the instructional math coaches within that are teaching the teachers or doing professional development for the teachers, or is that some other a
It's-
different expense?
It's professional development for the teachers and for the math coaches, the math
I see.
coaches.
So it's the
an
coaching for the
outside-
coaches.
Right.
Right, it's an
Right.
outside.
It's professional development for them
Okay.
to help them coach the teachers as well.
Yeah.
And are we at full complement for the math coaches? Because I know that was something that you
I believe that
at one
we
point
are
there was
fully-
concern that we'd be challenged finding.
It
math.
took us a while, but we're fully staffed on that area.
We don't have to go very far on the warrants. Just below that, middle of the page is is restoration company, I guess, for Leet Roof for $16,200. What was that for? The Leet Roof? Do you recall?
It was a replacement of a section of the roof, I think.
Interesting is coming out of, another, like an emergency repair of some sort that had to be done?
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't, I don't.
This isn't a roof replacement.
It's
whole big
usually you
project.
see
It's-
capital, anything with the capital projects coming out of the town, but
Yeah, no. This
this had to
was
also
something we
been
had to
some
do
sort of
right
emergency
away.
repair or
Yeah.
something. Okay, which came out of capital, I'm sure. Did it come out of the capital line item? Or did it come out of building?
Site improvement, I think.
Site improvement, yeah, that's,
Yeah,
that,
site
yeah, site improvement.
Yeah.
Capital.
So that ate into something,
Yeah, well,
Right.
but
so we'll find out what that might,
It just always comes out of something else.
yeah,
yeah.
okay.
I had a question on page 3. The high school gym reflooring was over $50,000, but I didn't see, other than one minor invoice, I didn't see anything for any of the other gym floors. Since the high school's the newest building in the district, why are we going into a big expense over there? And the other gym floors are okay, but
So the other gym.
Well, we do them periodically. I mean, last year we did, Adams? I mean, they'd all come up at the same time. But this particular floor, we went with I guess, sort of a new finish, and frankly, we were not very happy with the life of the finish. And so when we did this work, we changed back to a traditional product, and we
wasn't
think
covered
that,
in warranty.
no.
No. One of
No.
the, sorry.
I was just gonna say the gym floors do have to get refinished periodically. I don't know
Oh,
what that
yeah.
time frame is. I think, to Ken's question is, anybody who would look at this and see, oh, well, it's the high school floor, why is it being refinished so soon? But gym floors need to get refinished every, I don't know what that time frame is.
That floor
3 to 4
gets
years or
a lot of use.
Yeah.
Cliff Gurnham said that there was issues with where the gym teachers would put down tape
Oh,
on the
the
floor.
tape, yes,
And then
that's
the
right.
tape would sit so long when they would go to peel it up, it would leave residue, so it was really making a mess on the floor. So they stripped the whole floor down, and this was sooner than we would normally do it, and changed over to, repainted all the lines, and then put on oil finish on, as opposed to a water-based finish that was on there before. With
Which would
hopes
be
that
able to
this-
take any kind of
Hopefully this would take, and last
taping or
longer.
any other temporary
And-
lining or striping.
There was another invoice, I believe, on this warrant
There were 3 invoices there.
for,
For the striping.
no, it was for the, just recoating the gym floors in other schools. They
Adams,
didn't-
Baldwin.
Right, they
Yeah, for
didn't
a
need to be
much
s-
lesser amount.
They
Yeah,
didn't
much,
need to be
much
stripped.
lesser for
Right.
3 buildings.
Right, didn't need to be stripped down, it was just a new finish put on top.
Right.
Right.
But the
Whereas
gym floor
the
at
gym
high school
floor
obviously is
had-
much, much bigger in area as
Gone,
well,
right.
so.
And so it was completely sanded down, repainted, and refinished.
And when would it be, did Cliff give any indication what the period of time is before floors need to get refinished? Because it's a
Yeah.
pretty large number. You don't want to be doing that every couple of years.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact time frame that he said. I remember him saying it was sooner than normal, but I don't remember if he gave an exact time frame.
I do believe it's in the 3 to 5 range, somewhere in there, because gym floors do take such abuse that they have to get refinished. Otherwise, you start losing the grip and
Yeah.
yes. But it's a good question, because you would think, oh, why would it have to get refinished? But
I always ask good questions.
I know you do, Ken. Anything else on warrants? Minutes. Back to financials.
6.
How's enrollment?
It's, well, we don't have the official enrollment till October 1st. But the preliminary figures are better than we expected, but down from last year, obviously, but not down as much as we had expected.
But we're only, I think right now we were only off 5 from what we were anticipating when we did the budget process.
Okay.
But we are down from last year, which we knew we were gonna be down.
Yeah.
We don't have the final one till October
October.
1st, and then I guess we have to do another one, whatever day October 1st is, that following Friday, we have to do another one to get official counts, official enrollment.
And so far, have there been any substantial, are you anticipating any substantial changes in the special education? It's early, I realize, but
Oh, I had that, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
I apologize.
Oh, we get our hand up.
Yes, you get your hand out, I'm sorry, I do have it. So this is the tuition projection. These are very preliminary. And these are numbers, some of them I don't have the actual cost for the new year yet, so I'm basing it off of the previous years. But right now, our projection is that we are coming in under budget by $109,000. We do know.
Don't take that to the
Yeah,
Subject
this
to
is-
change.
Yeah, right. This
This
is
is-
a line item that has been very, very.
But considering this
Which is
time,
actually not with what we did with the budget, I would
Do we
hope that
have
we
enough
would be
copies
at
of
least
that?
closer,
okay.
right?
Yeah. Give one
Whether it's
to
under
Tracy.
or over by $100,000
I'll get
is
them for you at the end.
not bad from where we were last year.
Considering at this time last year, I think I was already starting to panic that we were over budget. So I'll take this for right now. We do know there's a couple of settlements that are in the works. We don't know what those are going to cost us, if they're going to cost us anything. And then there is the possibility that there are 2 students that we could be moving back into district or to another facility, which both of those would save us some money. But, like I say at the bottom, this is always
2 months
subject to
in.
change.
2 months in with a projection, so.
Right.
Will change. It will change.
It will change.
It will change.
It will change.
Thank you anyway.
But I'll take giving good news for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Noticed in the operations committee that the superintendent was going to be meeting with Tai-Soo Kim about an evaluation of the experiences with the new high school. Has that been set yet? Are we going to get benefit of that report? or what?
I'm not aware of whether that date is set or if it's occurred or not.
Oh,
I mean,
in item 9, they say he's scheduled to meet with them in the next 2 weeks, or next couple of weeks.
I haven't heard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would expect that's just for the consultant to see how things are progressing for their own knowledge. You know, a post-occupancy, it's a post-occupancy review. That's really what it is.
It was requested by the.
By them.
By them, yeah.
That's fairly common, so I don't think we'll be privy to that, but that's up to the superintendent if he wants to share it.
I'm not sure we'll see that report.
One quick thing. I showed this column adding up to 43 students, not 35 students.
Yikes. Okay, yeah, I'll have to fix that. I have a formula error. I changed around how I was breaking them out. And
So we have 8 fewer public tuition students than we originally budgeted for, is that correct?
Right, and most of it's really at the VOAGs, but this number could change, because I didn't have the registration list for VOAG, and so that may go up. But yes, and I will fix that for the next one.
How's year 2 of the new bus routes working out?
Well, let's put this in 2 stages. First, the startup is much better than last year, although that's not much of a test, because last year was quite a disappointment. So far, so good. I mean, I think that, last year we had a new bus company, a lot of new drivers. There were a lot of issues. And new start time. It was difficult for everybody involved. But we meet with them every month, and it looks like they've got a much better handle on it this time. And the feedback we're getting from parents is much more favorable. But, it's still early.
A question
Yes,
about the addition of a kindergarten teacher
yes,
at Guilford Lakes.
yes.
In the notes here, it indicates that we were able to absorb that within the budget.
That's correct.
Yes.
Could we explain that? I mean, that's a big number for a teacher. Is it based on retirements that we had a certain amount of fluidity in that account?
Right, so we anticipated as part of the budget process a certain amount that we would save from either retirements or resignations and hiring new staff. We were able to achieve a greater savings than what we anticipated, so we had salary savings going in to the
Okay.
budget from the retirements and resignations, so we were able to cover the cost of a teacher out of those savings.
Okay. And that preserved the class size limitations that
Yes.
you're concerned with.
Yes.
But there's some concern later on at Adams because they'll have a peak class at some point because of the spike at Lakes.
Yes.
Yeah. And that'll be a facility issue.
Yes.
They may not have the room.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we'll address that a couple years down the road, won't we?
Yeah, I mean,
Got a couple of years.
people move in, people move out.
Yeah,
It's,
because
we're
that's-
ways
I
away
mean,
from facing that.
You know, just on the radar. I mean,
Right.
a lot can happen between now and then. And it's happened to Guilford before, where
Right.
we've had peak.
Right.
One class have a peak in it. Yeah,
Yeah,
or a bubble, right.
yeah.
Anything else for Linda or Ted? Okay. If not, I would request a motion to accept the report of expenditures of the Board of Education for the month of August 2019 in the amount of $4,401,289.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions or recusals? Okay, all set. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Item number 5, review and approve report of expenditures for the town government for August 2019. Mary Jane. Good evening. All yours.
Okay. We'll start with revenues. First thing I want to say is that the totals didn't carry over from last year, so last year's total state, town and state revenue was actually 38.8%. So we are at 51.8% this time around. And the main reason, if you remember last year, tax collection at this time of the year was reported lower than actual because they were shorthanded and we hadn't had that in. So it's really not a fair comparison from last year to this year. Otherwise, most of our revenues are doing fairly well. And unless you have any particular questions.
Very well. The tax collections are 15% over last year.
Correct. Last year, we did not have all the revenues posted, although they were in the bank.
Okay.
So last year's number is not a fair comparison.
Okay.
I just have a couple of quick ones, Mary Jane. On the finance line, the monthly revenue, I'm just going to round it off, is 60,000, and the yearly is 90, which means last month it was 30. So we had 30 in July and 60 in August. Is that due to tax
Correct.
receipt
The
collection?
majority of all of our taxes comes in that very end of July and actually get to the bank mostly beginning of August. So we expect August and February to be our two largest months.
Okay. And then on the fire line, the monthly revenue was 63,000, and the year-to-date is $1,000 more than that. Was there really no revenue in July?
There was just
or
a delay in getting everything posted. That's all. It was really just a timing issue.
So that's really 2 months' worth
Correct.
of revenue then?
Mhm.
Okay.
And last year, fire pretty much kept up. So
Correct.
this is actually more of a
Right,
anomaly than,
Correct. So at the very beginning of the fiscal year, it's a little bit lower because much of the revenue that comes in July gets booked back as an accrual to the prior year. So July tends to appear to be a lower month,
okay.
more of an accounting practice than.
Anything else on revenue? Okay, expenditures.
Similar story on the expenditure side, right about where we were last year, just slightly higher. All of our departments are trending well. I will note that we have paid out the majority of our debt retirement principal, and the overage you see there are the premium credits that will eventually get transferred in, which is how that budget is put together. So it's not really over budget, it's just on paper at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see anything specifically. Always, a couple months into the fiscal year's
Yeah, it's hard.
fluctuations.
Again,
Anything?
We're catching up. Anything with a June date is back to June.
Right.
And that's the majority of what we're doing in the month of July, so.
Right. Anything on any of the warrants? Let's start with
Yeah.
weekly, or which ones?
The
Ken?
warrants,
Weekly? Or
Yes,
I'm sorry,
weekly.
It
would
looks
be
like the columns
Page
are
7.
messy on the vendor, at least on mine, on
You should have
the,
gotten, did you refresh?
the vendor name was out of place with all of the,
There's a corrected
okay,
one that was posted, so if you reload.
okay.
that's for the weekly?
That was for the
No,
weekly.
for the-
Or the-
Special fund weekly.
Special fund.
Special fund, okay.
Not all the columns sorted as well.
Yeah,
as
that
you'd
was,
have
it
liked.
didn't make sense.
It was a trick.
Okay. Worked.
See if you're paying attention. Yeah, but if you refresh or reload, you should get a corrected one.
Okay.
All right, well, I'll
So
open
where are
up
we
to,
starting? I heard weekly, I heard special, I heard.
I'll open it up to any warrants. How's that?
Okay.
Weekly,
I won't open any until you tell me.
special, regular,
Regular warrants?
non-regular?
Page 7.
I guess that would be considered
Page
special.
7 on the warrants.
Okay,
Okay.
the regular
I
weekly
notice, I
one?
guess this is traditional that we get so many tax refunds at this time of the year.
Correct. Now,
Very
keep in mind
big
that
number.
with tax collection, people have to pay their taxes, even if they know that they're overpaying. So they have to pay what they owe, and then that money is refunded later on. So we tend to get a lot this time of year. People have traded in their cars, but didn't tell anybody until they got their tax bill. Tends to be the largest issue. You know.
What about Guilford Tower, page 7? It's a $22,000 tax refund there.
That's the Comfort Inn.
It's a big property.
That's the Comfort Inn?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, just,
Beat me to it. Thanks, Jeff.
That was more than like an appeals settlement.
appeal
Right.
settlement that, yeah, based on the assessment, and
Yep.
it's a big property, so a refund could be fairly large on that. Okay. Anything else on warrants? I'm scanning very quickly to see. I don't think I had anything. If not, we can move on to medical. So, medical. Is there going to be a correction there?
Yes, if you.
Okay,
look-
I figured I'd just let you
If you look-
explain it.
If you look over to the far right for last
Yeah,
year,
yeah.
in July, the, very similar to like we're doing on our end, finishing up the fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
Anthem is doing the same thing, so.
So this is just-
Similarly, like.
This is a month behind, because they were,
Correct,
so
yes.
July last year it was
Only
76,000.
76,000, right.
And then it ballooned in August to catch up.
Correct, so I would expect.
So there'll be a catch-up in September.
I would expect next month,
Okay,
to have that jump.
that's what I figured.
Oh,
Kind of obvious when you look at that number, it's like, that can't be it, so. Okay,
No, we don't have any claims as of yet
Right.
that have reached the $75,000 limit. Of course, we're behind, as we just noticed. Typically, it takes a couple months to start generating something there.
right. And really, the formula is, the way the fund balance projection is at the bottom, it's fictitious because of the number in August.
Right, we know that
So we'll see- so
$1.2
we'll
million
re-review it
anticipated-
next month.
Right.
There's really nothing yet, because that,
Hopefully by next month,
Yeah.
things will have
okay.
come in.
Is there anything else on medical? Anything else at all? Okay. If not, then I will entertain a motion to approve the report of expenditures of the town for the month of August 2019, the amount of $10,440,531.
So moved?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? Okay. Great. Thank you. Yes, don't go anywhere. You already knew. Item number
There
6.
might be a question or two.
There might be a-
I'm glad to go sit back in the audience.
Might be a couple. Might have a partner in a second. Item number 6, consider and take possible action to authorize transfers from unassigned fund balance and/or the medical fund balance. So we have two memorandums, both from Mary Jane, both to members of the Board of Selectmen and Finance, both dated September 12th. The first one is transfer from internal service fund balance. And I will read this because I think we need to make sure the public knows what we're doing here. As of the end of fiscal year 2019, our internal service fund or medical fund balance is approximately $5 million. At a minimum, the town should carry no less than 2 months of total expenditures. Based on fiscal year 2019, the average monthly expenditure amount is $1 million. Therefore, at least $2 million should remain in the fund for this purpose. I respectfully request that $1 million be transferred from the internal service fund into the general fund and applied to the fund balance committed to OPEB line item. After this transfer, there will be an approximate $4 million balance. Thank you for our consideration. I think really what this is we've been talking about this for a while in terms of the medical account being healthy and looking at some level of transfer going to OPEB when it is established, but that's not quite in the cards. Well, it's in the process, the OPEB. I mean, I would open this up to discussion. I guess this is just prepping for the fact that we're putting money into a committed account to prepare for a transfer into the OPEB fund when it's created. That's my understanding of this. Is there any, my only question is there any pro or con to do this now versus later? Does it matter?
No, other than if you do it now, it'll be reflective in your audit for June 30, 2019.
And would that be?
So the money would be set aside for that purpose.
And that would be reflected in a positive? Would that be a positive note to the auditor? Or doesn't it really,
Yes,
does it really matter?
take it off the management letter as a
It would be directly addressing an issue
a concern
that they've
that
had
they
and we've
noted.
had that we're addressing. So I would think that, yeah, this is a positive to do now. And so I don't have an issue with this particular item. Anybody else have any?
Is there any issue with regard to
The fact that the Board of Education contributed to the $5 million surplus? And do we need to make, and since they're not going to be participating, at least not right now, in the OPEB, do we need to get into trying to figure out what the Board of Education's contribution has been to that surplus and what's the town's? I just can see us having that discussion at some point down the road, and I don't know if we want to.
Then we might have had to have that discussion when the Board of Ed moved their money from the medical fund into the pension fund, which we felt was absolutely appropriate. That was close to $1 million there as well.
I'm just trying to avoid an issue down the road by having the discussion now to say, I just want to make sure that the Board of Ed said, some of that's our money that you're putting into this benefit program that our contributors won't be participating in.
I agree, we've had those conversations, and there has been no pushback to establishing the OPEB trust. In fact, the superintendent of schools is going to be at the table as we establish the trust. And your point is well taken. 2 years ago, the Board of Education withheld $900,000 contribution from this fund. They did a similar withhold this year of $240,000. Several years ago, when the fund was underwater, the town contributed, I think, $500,000 to shore it up.
The town
And the Board of Ed,
contributed to that.
right? So it's been cooperative throughout. My understanding is the superintendent is not going to be in the way, a step in the way of this. And thank you for asking the question, but it's ultimately your call.
What was? I vaguely recall us transferring $200,000 or $300,000. 200 last year. Was it not for this?
It was
the
same purpose.
thing?
Same purpose.
So this is being added to that 200, correct?
Correct.
So we will have a total of
seed.
1.2 in there now, is there? Okay.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
last year.
this isn't an initial,
Came from
this is
surplus.
not an initial transfer, is
It's
my
not.
point, that's what I thought.
Right,
Okay.
it would add to
And
that.
last year was, I
Continuation of a
think last
practice
year
that
was
started last
largely,
year.
last year was largely symbolic that this board acknowledged that we have a long-term obligation
Right.
and a long-term
Right.
liability that we want to start to address, and this is one of those opportunities to do that.
Right.
Is there any further discussion regarding this transfer?
Why wouldn't we do 2 million as opposed to only 1 million? I'm just asking the question.
Well, the same question came up at the Board of Selectmen as well. Certainly, we could. I felt that at least 1 million was a start to, as we start to look at what is in this fund, and possibly, we look at it again next year to see, what we might be able to do.
This doesn't necessarily have to be a one-time event every year. If we get 6 months into the budget year and we see that that it's going to grow by another $1 million, you certainly, we could certainly all talk about making another contribution at that time. The quicker we build that fund, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The quicker we build that fund, the sooner we're going to be able to start
Listen.
tapping into it.
I'd gladly take 2 million. There's a lot of, I won't say, I'll use controversial, that's not quite the right word, over how much should be in this fund. If you speak to our advisors, they don't feel that the fund is overfunded because they look at 2 or 3 months worth of expenditures plus the IBNR. It brings us up to 4. So I felt that requesting $1 million was a good, compromise, so to speak, between the numbers to say, yes, we realize that maybe the fund has more than it needs at this point, but I also don't want to deplete it.
One of the things that needs to be said is when this becomes an OPEB trust, you would not be able to draw money from that. If up until that point, we can reserve it in this account, and then you would have the ability to move it back if we had an issue. However, once the trust is in place, gone.
Right, and I'll just add that if you put 2 million today, if you chose to put 2 million into this committed fund balance, you still have the authority at some point. This board has to agree to move that money into the trust. It's not an automatic. So if you put 2 million in or 3 million in today, and then 6 months from now, when the trust goes into place, will be coming back to you for a transfer into the trust. So there's more opportunity to discuss it at another time.
So we could add to it.
You could add to it then.
We could add to it.
At the time.
Well, I like that
Or
idea.
we could decide to transfer.
We're being conservative
a
now,
small
but we could
amount.
see, hey, it's
Correct.
heading
You
towards.
could do less or more,
Right,
correct.
it might be heading towards 6 million, and we could say, okay, let's add another million, because now we'll be at 4 million.
500,000.
Right, 'cause
But I think being conservative is the
Our
right
actuaries
approach
are
on this.
working on the numbers for the OPEB trust, taking into account different discount rate, because once we have a trust fund, and then we have different rates, and so our $28 million liability will come down, because that's just a book number. So they're working on that. So by the time the trust is in place and we're ready to do that, we'll have some really good numbers from our actuaries to see what we need in that trust moving forward. So it'll be another opportunity to review those numbers.
Anything further on this action?
I just want
Go
to,
ahead, 'cause-
I just want to note that I wasn't trying to be smart mouth over the Board of Ed. The Board of Ed, we were totally in agreement with everything the Board of Ed did, and I feel that the Board of Ed is in agreement with this as well, so.
Well, if this
you know.
was, if this was a major issue, I'm sure Linda would feel comfortable to say that the Board of Education or superintendent doesn't necessarily feel the same way as the finance director, so.
We've been very open that this was going to be coming
It's been
forward.
it's been a very open process,
An
so,
ongoing dialogue.
yeah. Yeah, this is not a surprise
I just
at
didn't
all.
want anybody to take my comment the wrong way, that's
No,
all.
no. Thank you. Okay, so I would like to entertain a motion then.
I'll
To-
move that.
Go
we
ahead.
Transfer $1 million from the internal service fund, what we call the medical fund, into the general fund and be applied to the fund balance committed to the OPEB line item. We're not transferring it into a trust that doesn't exist yet. We're just putting it into that line item, fund balance.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Do I
I'll
hear a s-
second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Okay. I should say abstentions. But I heard it, I heard all in favor, so. All right, so memorandum number 2. If I open up the right one here. Okay. This memo is for transfers from unassigned fund balance. I am anticipating, this is Mary Jane, I am anticipating close to a $2 million surplus at the end of fiscal year 2019. The estimated surplus will automatically transfer into the town's unassigned fund balance. In order to keep our percentage of UFB, unassigned fund balance, at the 10% level, as noted in our policy, approximately $265,000 of that amount would need to stay in the unassigned fund balance. The balance is available for other uses. Therefore, I respectfully request a transfer from unassigned fund balance into the following lines. There are 6 lines here. Fund balance committed to revaluation, $425,000. Fund balance committed to future facility projects, $400,000. Fund balance committed to coastal resiliency, $200,000. Fund balance committed to future road projects, $400,000. Fund balance assigned to continued in force, $16,000. Fund balance restricted to future debt payments, $300,000. And again, thank you for your consideration. So after reading this, there's a couple here that I think are fairly straightforward of what they're being used for. Revaluation being one. I think on continue in force, that one. I would like to get a little bit more detail, and I know some of these are to put money into a committed fund balance for future projects. I know I've talked about this as far back as when I was on the Standing Building Committee and coming onto the Board of Finance for future facility projects, for example, is to be able to have a fund that you can pull out of to be able to get good design cost estimates, to be able to go to the public, to go to bonding with, to go to referendum with, budget referendum for bonding projects and have a really good number. Right now, we kind of do some of these things a little bit more, that I wouldn't say seat of the pants, but we're a little bit more conservative on the estimates. So that's one area that we could use this for.
And I'll add to that is that those original design costs then get rolled into the cost of the bond, and we're paying a premium for, we're paying interest on many of those things that could be accomplished with one-time funds.
So that one I also understand for the most part. When it gets in the coastal resiliency, future road projects, future debt payments, I was hoping that it could get a little bit more detail,
Yeah,
and I think some of the board members would probably.
If you'd indulge me, I'll go through even
that
the
would be
future facility projects.
Thank you.
In particular, the facility projects that we have that we're committed to, the Board of Selectmen is committed to at this point, is the 52 Church Street building, the one to my left, your right, that we purchased over a year ago for rehabilitation as parking, enhanced parking for this facility. The Board of Education is looking at the potential, is seriously contemplating the renovation of the upper floor of the science wing, and would be willing to commit some monies for engineering work there. We've got some other smaller projects that Steve Neidorf has had his eye on for a while. That'll show up in subsequent capital budgets. And not the least among those is the potential rehabilitation of the food pantry facility as one of them. And then there are a host of other projects that smaller ones that may well come to play. The original estimate for the 52 Church Street, demolition of the existing building, which has asbestos in it, as well as the construction of a parking lot and landscaping to ensure the integrity of the streetscape remains somewhat consistent. That could be a $150,000 to $200,000 project. So that's where the 400 comes from. Coastal resilience, we have two. Yes, Mike.
Just for a second. To get to that total number, where were those numbers coming from? Was there a consultant that was talked to? Was it just?
These are internal estimates between our engineering and facilities folks.
So they're high-level internal estimates?
Absolutely high level.
Okay.
There are no, I'm not going to the bank with any of these those numbers.
Okay.
For the coastal resilience, we have two significant projects that we're looking at right now, and that is the rehabilitation, or not the rehabilitation, but perhaps the re-engineering of Falcon Road and Chimney Corners down in the Satcham's Head area, and those are directly related to coastal resilience. As you may or may not recall, Falcon Road was shut down basically throughout the winter. One of the significant nor'easter storms decimated the seawall and the road. So that was shut down basically from the January, February timeframe right through to July 4th. We were fortunate to be able to rehabilitate and fix that road with Public Works craft. However, a longer-term solution is possibly changing the face of that road and rerouting it back away from its current location where the seawall is. Chimney Corners is, there are some neighbors down here who at regular high tides are driving through a foot to 2 feet of water. So we have RFPs ready to roll for engineering evaluations for those 2 projects. So those are the 2 specific coastal resilience projects that we're looking at. In terms of future road projects, as you all may recall, we have, every time we look for cuts in the budget, we're typically going to capital, and Public Works has not had the budget allocations they would like to keep up with our traditional road maintenance and road rehabilitation. And you may have noticed over the last 6 months we've had a significant amount of rain and subsequent flooding issues. We have drainage problems that are popping up all over town that need to be addressed, and those could be catch basins and minor road regrading, those kind of things. But there are actually on our plate right now reconstruction of Elm Street, Millstone and Old Mill, Briarwood, New England Road, High Street, and Norton Street. These are all have been identified as potential beneficiaries of some road work. And then the future debt payments. This is one that Mary Jane and I go back and forth with. We don't necessarily wholeheartedly agree. My good friend Jonathan Trotta, who's not here today, he and I have argued about these kind of things in the past, but this is akin to creating our own premiums or credits that we normally get when we go to the bond market. I'm sure you recall, we go to the bond market, we sell bonds, you get premiums, which is a credit where they actually pay us to sell those bonds. And we've traditionally used those credits to offset increases in our bond and debt service payments. So we've currently, this year, I think we applied, a little over 300,000. But occasionally this can be, the supply eventually runs out. And this is using one-time events to mitigate operating budget expenses. I am less convinced than Mary Jane of the need for this. However, the Board of Selectmen did approve it this morning as they approved all of these projects. With that, I'll open it up to any questions on anything I said or omitted.
You did mention something very briefly about our colleague, Jonathan Trotta, not being here.
Correct.
Because this goes to the point of, we've talked about this. Again, this is not something that's a surprise to us, that our unassigned fund balance has been in that 10% level. We've been trying to approach that from a dismal number years ago. We've built that up. Now we're at a point where we can look at some of that excess and see where we can reallocate it to areas where we don't have to now put that in the budget or bond. And this is the use that we as leaders of this town can now allocate to areas that either get cut or just would throw the mill rate up, and this is use of that. Matt, thank you very much for the description of those, because I wasn't sure where a lot of that was going. Just remind me on the assigned to continued enforce.
That is,
That's
in last year's budget, we had the town's portion, $16,000 of the bus grant for the community center. That we just recently received notification of that this year.
Okay.
So this is just a way to hold that money over so that we have use of it in the current year to purchase the bus.
Okay. So the first four are committing to their own uses, and then the assigned is just continuing to this year's budget.
Correct.
And restricted to future debt payments is to create that
Right, it's not the
reserve,
first,
so to
it's not
speak.
the first time you've moved money into
No.
the restricted, I found it in
Right.
a few, before I came forward with it, I was looked back to see what you might have done. It was done in the past, specifically at the beginning of the high school project, to seed that account, to help with the mitigation of the peaks. You know, we do have the one more large peak coming in 2021, so I'm looking to mitigate that, and then the bond payments will start to, you know, slowly go down after that, but I'm just looking to help with the impact, and mitigate the impact of what next year's budget might look like.
And to be clear, the peak is next year, but not the biggest increase. It's
Correct.
just a matter, it's been rolling up there, now it's peaking,
Right.
and then it'll start.
We've been
rolling down.
using the
So it's not
credits
the
that-
biggest increase,
right.
just it will finally hit the
We've
peak.
been using the credits to step that up slowly and try to keep them down, so it's just, you know, hopefully to mitigate that last bump.
One of the things and then I'll open it up for everybody to have a discussion on this. One of the things I'm looking at on each of these items, and I don't know if it came up during the Board of Selectmen meeting and their review of this, is there's nothing here that is specifically targeted to a certain constituency or a certain area of town or it is a wide range of areas that everybody in the town of Guilford is going to be.
Say for coastal resilience, the folks in North Guilford may not necessarily.
But they're true needs,
But-
and nothing
but
on
let's-
here
let-
is.
let's-
But honestly, besides the people that live there, there's people that visit there, there's people that, I mean, it's still a town, it's a value to the town.
Agreed, but there's a significantly larger question with coastal resilience, which we'll be facing more and more over time.
It's not gonna be $200,000.
And that is that the largest percentage of our tax base is the most endangered portion of the community with respect to coastal flooding and coastal and sea level rise. There is no question that that's where the significant tax base is.
That's a good point.
So that's an investment in protecting the properties that drive some of the highest taxes in town.
Okay. At this particular moment, I'm looking at all these different items, and although I had some questions about them before you brought up the line items and all the different uses of that, in fact, on a couple of these, I wonder, like future facility projects, that's why I asked about the 400,000, bless you. Is that high level or is that estimate? Because I'm almost thinking in some cases that might be more, but that's something we can address as we get to that, but at least it's designating a committed number to those projects, so.
Not only that, but it gives us an opportunity to move quickly. Now, let's recall that in order for us to expend that money out of those funds, we have to come back to you.
Still gotta come back here.
Yeah, we have to come back to you for approval.
Right.
But conceptually, we've all agreed that these are the general purposes for which
It's a
we want to use that
reallocation
money.
of- yes.
And we don't have to start from ground zero.
There's a reallocation unassigned money for uses that we need in this community.
And it is taxpayer dollars that are sitting on the sideline, all right? And the use of same will offset future tax increases if we have to complete those projects without this money.
Yeah, probably a larger amount, because then it'll be emergency. Further discussion? There's no motion on the table. I usually say that when there's a motion on the table. There's no motion. And what I am intending on doing is going through each of these and not doing a blanket. I'd like to have an approval for each of the items to make sure it's clear that's where the money's going and what it's going to be used for and the amount. So that's the intention that I have.
Does the transfer of these amounts, you don't think it's going to have any impact with regard to our financial, how other outside agencies will look at us with regard to amount we have?
As a matter,
In fact, they will look very favorably on this. The mere fact that we moved $200,000 into the OPEB account last year came up in both of our ratings calls with Fitch and Moody's, and they highlighted the fact that that's the kind of financial planning, longer-term financial planning that they're expecting to see. Obviously, you're all aware that we were AAA rated by both agencies, but financial management and the ability to look forward is what they place a high value on.
And all the money is still in our fund balance. It's not spent. It's just set aside, and again, you have the autonomy of putting it back if you wanted to.
And we don't go below the recommended 10%.
Well, your policy is 5 to 10.
Yeah.
This leaves it approximately 10. Yeah, I'm just saying.
I know, it depends on who you talk to, what the number
Right,
is.
right.
But
We go through it
Are there
every year.
agencies
I
out there
know,
that go
but
more than 10?
I have to work on policies that are in
I
place, and
know.
the policy is 5 to 10.
Yeah, we have 5 to 10. Are there agencies that look at 10 and saying, oh, no, that's not enough, we need to go 15? I mean, there's some agencies I've heard that go 5 to 15, and they think that's the 15's the amount.
There are some
So
rating
we've-
agencies that look as much as 25.
we made a
but
policy
We have good
get
financial
to 10.
planning, so they have not, requested anything more of us.
Yeah.
Ken would do this analysis in his head, but the difference between the basis points between AAA and AAA plus or whatever the next rating is from those guys, the difference in bonding costs are going to be infinitesimal. And we'd be keeping $5 million sitting on the sidelines if we were to get to 15%.
Okay. Anything further before I start reading out?
Well, just, my
Anticipated
position is
motion?
pretty much the same as it was the last time we did this. We, for the past, how many years now, 6, 7, we've had over $1 million surpluses. One could argue, I'm saying one could argue that that represents overtaxation to the community. In this case, one thing we could do, which I'm not suggesting we do because it would be costly and burdensome, would be to actually return the $2 million to the taxpayers that paid the taxes last year because, again, in essence, they were overtaxed. The unassigned fund balance is often referred to as the rainy day fund. To me, what we did when we transferred, I think it was $600,000 last year. We had we transferred roughly $600,000 out to 2 line items, which I was against. To me, these items and those items are items that should appear in the annual budget. It should be budgeted for, and in the event you run over, then you have the rainy day fund, and I appreciate your wanting to delineate it, but that's not really a to me, it's not a rainy day event. These are planned events by nature of the fact, by definition, that they were just itemized. None of them can be, in my opinion, construed as being rainy day events. So I'm sort of opposed, not sort of, I am opposed to taking funds that were for a rainy. I would rather see us budget, call it more aggressively, less aggressively, whatever. I'd rather see us budget such that we don't have a $2 million surplus, and which means we don't have as large a tax increase, which means there is a chance that we have to go into something like the rainy day fund in the event we can't make our bills. But historically, we have not really gone over. We've done a good job of meeting our budgetary expectations. I think that the surpluses that we've had primarily, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, I think the surpluses, which is a bit unfortunate, the surpluses have come from the revenue side of the equation primarily, rather than the expense side of the equation. It would be better from, bless you, it would be better from an ongoing cost-saving basis to have the savings come on the expense side, because you're still compounding at your 2.5%, 3% rate, whatever your annual increase is in your expenditures. So that's sort of in the nutshell. I'm sure all of everything, I don't disagree with any of these concepts in terms of how the money might ultimately be spent or allocated, but to me, 95%, I'm making that number up, but I'm guessing it, 95% of the town of Guilford, the taxpayers have no idea that this is happening, and so they see their tax increase, they see the budget that gets printed in the paper. A lot of them probably don't look through the individual line items. And so in a way, while this is transparent, it's not really going out to, they have the opportunity to see it, but they don't really see it, because this isn't really the budget that we built. It's putting money aside for a nice budget, for things that we'd like to get done. This will perhaps mitigate future, tax increases in the next budgetary cycle, which is what we did in the last, and my argument was, budget for it, tell people, charge it. So I think I'm being consistent in what I said last time, and I'm not saying it's bad or whatever, it's just the methodology.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where I stand.
And I guess, I understand, and you are being consistent, and appreciate that. One of the things I look at is also, you talk about the rainy day fund being used for, emergency purposes, whether you need to pull it, because we need to pull it for a budget that we didn't meet. I look at it also as a one-time. If there are one-time expenditures that need to get done, this is not, one of the things we hear a lot is, well, why don't you just pull it to balance your budget? And I know you're not suggesting that, I know that. But when it comes down to it, these are expenditures like revaluation. Yeah, it's not a one-time, it's every, 5 years. But still, we haven't been putting anything towards revaluation because we've been trying to keep the budgets very tight. So that would be my one point. The second point is simply that whether we do it here, I'm sure this can go out in some sort of format of public relations and gets out in the papers, and I know that not everyone reads the papers, but, if there's some sort of press release about the use of this, I certainly would be in favor of that. I think that's something that we could work on together to make sure people know that this is how it's being used. But if it's not here, at some point it's going to hit us later on down the road in a budget, because we're going to have to ask for the reval numbers. We're going to have to ask for facility projects, and I could go right down the line. So at some point, we're going to need them. So, but you, although you agree with this, your issue is more the methodology than it is the actual, this is needed, because you are saying that these are needed.
Well, I'm not saying they're needed or they're not needed. On face level, I don't have a problem with any of them. Right. But back to your budget comment, in the event you put all of this into a budget, it's going to create a budget increase which is quite high, which increases the chances of the voters actually saying no. And that gets back to my point wherein these people that aren't aware that this is going on actually get a chance to see this and they say no. And if and when they say no, that forces this board and the various town organizations to figure out a way to cut the costs. By doing this, we are potentially doing an end around and showing them a budget increase that is less than it would be if all of this were put into a one-time budget. And so there's a greater probability of you having flexibility, of us having flexibility to get more things done, but portray it as a lower budget increase, which it would be. And you could make the argument, which I don't agree, which I would, wouldn't be far from true, in that, as I said initially, one thing we could do would be to give the money back to the taxpayer. You could make a cogent argument that this is, in essence, giving it back to the taxpayer. It's just in a slightly different way than I would suggest doing it.
Right. And I would just say with the budgets that are presented, I would challenge that when a taxpayer in the town of Guilford looks at a budget, to look at all of those line items in totality, it actually might be considered more transparent to actually do something like this and make it very pointed that we are using the money for this, as opposed to trying to put it in a budget where it can be very difficult for the taxpayers in general to understand every single line item that's in that budget. If there's whether they know it as part of a budget with many line items, or a vote like this where it's taking it 6 items and making it very clear that this is how we're using it.
I would beg to differ with you on that, in that we generally go through, or the paper goes through and identifies where the biggest increases were. And here you've got 4 that are, $300,000 or $400,000, which is normally, that would be your whole budget, basically. If you're looking at, a $2 to $3 million increase in budget, you're talking about 2% right here.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you throw in another 2 or 2 1/4, now you're looking at a 4 1/4 to 5% budget increase. And if we take all of this on top of our usual something between 2 to 3% increase, again, you're looking at 4 to 5%. And I would posit that if we put out an initial budget that looked like 4 to 5%, we are going to get some pushback.
Yes.
Whereas if we do this and we throw something out that looks like 2 to 3%, in my opinion, which is what I said, we have sort of, I wouldn't say misled, but we've portrayed it in a different manner, and that gets back to that.
There's a perception issue, as opposed to this where we already have it, we're asking for it in the budget. If we increase it, it's an increase here, we already have
We're also
it.
just authorizing, they
So-
still have to come back to the board with whatever they use the money for.
The specifics.
Yeah, the specifics.
Yeah, Matt, I know you had your hand up, so.
Ken, I agree with much of your premise that if we were to bring all these items at budget time, it would show a significant increase. However, my bet would be this board, in particular, my good friend Jonathan, who's not here, would say, we've got all this money sitting on the sidelines, let's use some of it to mitigate the cost of the taxpayers. Let's assume for a moment that we all agree that these projects need to be done. They might not all need to be done in the time frame of next year's budget cycle, but we agree that they do need to be done. So as a body, you put it out there. I think you would probably be tempted to use some of that surplus above the 10% unassigned fund balance and apply it immediately there. I will caution, however, that was a practice that was done in this town since the 60s. There were built-in surpluses that were used year over year to offset following year's tax increases. Mm-hmm. In fact, it got up to as high as $1.2 million at one point. And then when we lost the ability to collect, a lot of it was we grossly underestimated interest income. When those surpluses started to disappear, there was no way to fund last year's increase, let alone the following years. Mm-hmm. So there would be some temptations to use this money at that point anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
I'm
I'm agreeing with your original.
Yeah,
I'm agreeing with your original premise that it would show.
No, and that's what John wanted to do last year. Every year, John says he wants to take some of the unassigned fund balance and put it out there. And again, if these are one-ish time events, then again, I would prefer you put it out there in the budget and say this is one time off, and it's not something we've done certainly since I've been on the board, and I would hope that it wouldn't become systemic as you indicated was years ago.
Well, I would love to have the same problem next year if we had another $2 million surplus, and we could have the same conversation.
Right.
It would be a bad conversation to have.
And we've been building.
But I don't suspect we're going to be in the same position.
Right.
Since I've been on the board, this has not happened, because I came on the board when it was dismal and falling, and it fell to a low, and we've been building. So it went to a valley and has been building up. So to be in this place is a good place, but it needs to be spent wisely.
In effect, for the last 7 or 8 years, we've been doing exactly that. We've been taking taxpayer money, surplus money, and putting it aside to grow our fund balance so we've been doing virtually the same thing, as opposed to actually, there are some communities that actually budget to keep their fund balance levels high. They're actually, as a component of their tax base, that covers the growth in their fund balance.
I thought that was illegal. That's
It's being done.
You can't have a line.
You can't have a.
Just as long as you don't state you're doing that.
Absolutely right. But everyone acknowledges, on if you're gonna keep your, your threshold at 10%, and you have a $2 million budget increase year over year, you have to find $200,000 to keep yourself at 10%.
Further discussion?
Only that, we did budget for a reval and we had to cut it. We did. So, it was a budgeted item, but we had to take it out.
That was a couple years ago, wasn't
Yeah.
it? It wasn't this year. And then we maintained that, hoping that we'd be in this position.
But
because-
we would put money in X amount of dollars, $100,000 or whatever the number is, over 2 or 3 years, because it's on a 4-year cycle, 4 or 5-year cycle. Yeah,
Yeah.
so to build up, so we'd have the 400,000, and we'd have to cut it, so it's,
That 425, is that, what do we have right now for revaluation? Do we have anything at all? Do we have,
About $6,000.
oh, okay. I didn't know if there was a year that we had asked for it, and, okay, so the
No way.
425 is the number.
The estimates are somewhere between high 380s to 390 up to 425, so.
Okay, so it's,
I mean,
so
and
these are,
that's an old
that's a
estimate,
conservative
so
number, so
it's
that.
an old estimate, so,
Okay.
I
That's what we
anticipate.
would be charged to do the reval.
Correct,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
It's a good-
and we have to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to entertain motions, trying to make this as easy as possible for all of us. So, see if I get this right. So on the first one, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the transfer of $425,000 from unassigned fund balance into a line for fund balance committed to revaluation.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Me.
Any abstentions? Okay. Entertain a motion to approve the transfer of $400,000 from unassigned fund balance into a line for fund balance committed to future facility projects.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion?
I just had a question for this, with regard to the science wing. The town owns that now, correct? Correct. Does making any of these improvements have any, are we out of auditing the bonding, and we don't have to worry about doing something that we shouldn't be doing?
The clawback,
I
we're
mean-
beyond the clawback period.
Okay.
That was our biggest concern. And by the way, the town owns every building anyway.
Right, but
But-
that wasn't to be used for.
But based on the Board of
It was the
Education, of the
US,
State
that's right.
Department of Education
Right.
reimbursement grant, yeah, that's not gonna affect.
So we've gone past the clawback window on the funding for the original science one.
And to that point, but slightly different, this is for, on the future facility projects, this is largely for the design
Right.
of those projects. And when you had mentioned the former, still call it the former science wing, that's already under design. That's already, there's a consultant already working on the design to consolidate
Contract was approved.
the Board of Education offices into that building, correct? Okay. And so that's part of this 400. Any further discussion on that?
One other question. Is Lathrop House involved in any of this too?
Yes, it is. There could be some of that money goes towards the rehabilitation of Lathrop House as well. Lathrop House is going to be a significant challenge for a variety of reasons.
For sale purposes? Or for town purposes?
One of the problems
TBD.
in terms of trying to sell that property
There's
is
another
that it has
building
a
next
shared,
door that's using the septic system.
it has a shared septic system, and
Right,
it's
single
actually,
purpose.
the library has a portion of their facility on that plot. There's some challenges there.
Anything else? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstentions? Okay. Entertain a motion to approve the transfer of $300,000 from unassigned fund balance into a line for fund balance committed to coastal resilience.
I think it's 200.
200,000.
Did I say that wrong?
No, it's
300,000.
300,000 was in the memo, but.
300?
The one I'm reading says 2.
Oh, it does. This one says 2.
Hold on a
this one
second,
says
hold on
3.
a second, because was this updated?
If you're looking at the memo I handed out tonight,
Coastal resiliency is 200.
Wait a minute, okay, so the one that I have on board pack is 200, and the memo here is 300.
Mary Jane's memo on board.
So which one is it?
200.
It's 200. The one on board pack is correct. It's fine. It's fine. I just,
Original draft. if
Okay.
it changed since that, I'm not sure.
okay, as long as the updated document is on here. Let me just look at the other numbers, make sure I don't read anything else. Okay, got it. So it's for $200,000. You can make that correction without me reading it again? Okay. That was made in the form of a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Excuse me, the 200,000 was in the September 12th memo.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's
The
the one.
300,000 is in the September 16th.
And we just clarified that
Okay.
it's the one that's on board pack. It's 200. Yep.
So we're essentially moving on the
We're moving on 200,000.
memo of September 12th.
That
You're
is,
not moving on the memo, you're moving on the motion, like just, or
Yes,
Veronica.
but based on the data,
right,
it's the earlier memo. Yeah.
okay. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstentions? Okay, let me go back here. I'd like to entertain another motion to approve the transfer of $400,000 from unassigned fund balance into a line for fund balance committed to future road projects.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. How many road projects were there that you had mentioned?
Those are
Just
potential, that we're not committing to any of those.
just approximately. You could even say approximately.
There
Was it half
those,
dozen?
that number, drainage issues, so between drainage issues and then the other streets I listed off, that was 7 different projects. But
Right.
those are not to be included in your,
They're not. I'm not, I just, for discussion purposes, that's all. Just what the scope of the,
and that's
Possible.
very fluid. The next storm could create a completely different list.
right. We're allocating money to go into this committed fund. Okay. Further? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstention. Okay, entertain a motion to approve the transfer of $16,000 from unassigned fund balance into a line for fund balance committed to continue in force.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstentions. And finally, do we hear a motion to approve the transfer of $300,000 from unassigned fund balance into a line for fund balance committed to future debt payments?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstention? Okay.
It's the most times I've said opposed.
At least
It would have been easier if we just did it as one big lump.
Well, we wouldn't have caught that $200,000.
That's true.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jane.
Okay, thank you everyone for all that reading. Item number 7, committee reports, building permit report. Veronica, I don't know if there's anything you want to report that wasn't already said in the Guilford Courier. If anyone wants to know.
After a year plus,
Year plus? Yeah.
we passed new building fees and significantly made the fee structure much more efficient. And we're more in line with our neighboring communities. So it was a job well done, a long job, but very pleased that it's been done.
And Veronica, thank you for serving on that as a subcommittee member. Appreciate it.
Greatly simplifies the administrative burden of having to manage multiple types of permits and the number of permits that are actually issued. So there is some opportunity to streamline our processes and provide better customer service, more timely customer service.
That's a good point.
And this morning, while it's not related to building permits, the Board of Selectmen, on the recommendation of the Public Works Commission, approved an increase in the fees at the stump dump There are no fee increases to individuals who bring their own stuff. This happened to, was impacting the commercial folks who are bringing in yards. We had been charging $1 a yard for disposal, for dumping. Most communities are somewhere between the 12 and 15 range. So we think we've been getting a significant number of our neighbors, brush and so forth over the years. So we went to $10 as a start and see what kind of impact that has. Like the building permit fee increases and streamlining, we should see some additional revenue coming in next year. And we'll have enough data, but we probably won't have enough data.
We won't have a lot of data, but it's budget time.
But you will see an increase in projected revenues for both of those departments next year.
When's the effective date of that?
The building permit fees is effective October 18th, and the permit fees for the stump dump went into effect immediately.
I thought it was interesting that then I looked at the building permit reports, and the building permits for single family residences, we're on track to we're on track. I mean, I know it changes, but 7 in the first 2 months is, I think we get 7 like halfway through the year. So I've always liked reading that off. I don't know why, but I just find it interesting.
And if there's a subdivision up on
Yeah.
Hill gets approved, you're going to get another 30, between 25 and 30 possibly. You may not pull all of them at once, but.
Okay, thanks, Veronica. Item 8, old business. I believe that we all now have the RFP draft for auditing services. Mary Jane, you posted this today, right? This is more of just informational. I mean, this is the same RFP that we've sent out for auditing services over a number of years that we've done it. So this is the draft so everyone could have a record version of it. It is the intent, I believe, of the Board of Finance right now, at least I've heard some intent to go out to RFP. And this is the document for auditing services. So, Mary Jane, next step.
So I just got a couple things I'd like to say.
Sure.
Items in red or highlighted are items that still need to be looked at, dates and stuff. 2 specific pages that would be most important for us to look at are page 9, which is the calendar of how we are going to put this out. Last time we went out in January purely because I started the very end of October and was, the next day they said we need to go out to bid, so it was January. So it seemed to work well. And also on page 17, the selection committee last time was made up of 3 members of the Board of Finance. So at some point you'll want to think about, first of all, whether or not if that's who you want to be the subcommittee, and if so, who might serve, so that we'll know as staff who to deal with. So otherwise everything is pretty much the same as we did in 2017. Pretty standard.
And I'm sorry, did I understand it went out today?
No.
And it went only to you.
No, this is
Okay.
just a
Oh,
draft
it's us.
for
Okay.
us to look at if we have any questions or.
Right, so like I said.
It's an
all
old
the
business item that we're carrying, and the
all the
intent
items
is.
in red, yeah, but it's a little bit too soon to go. Last year, between January and March, 6 Connecticut communities went out for RFP. So I would expect, we would do it somewhat after the first of the year as well. They're all finishing up audits and barely getting them done by December. It's really not fair of us, nor will we get the best responses if we do it during all of the auditors' most busiest time of the year. So got plenty of time to look at this, and if you see any, please let me know if you see anything that doesn't seem to make sense or whatever. But
Thank you for posting.
it's really just a first draft for all of you to see, and just so you know that we are moving, we are moving forward with it.
And And then we would, do we eventually make a motion and go ahead and approve to send out the RFP, or is there a motion associated with it? I mean, I know we're not doing anything tonight, but
We don't necessarily need a
we
motion,
just say, please,
other than,
just send it out in January, and then we
right,
create a
if
subcommittee.
everybody agrees with what's in here and the
Okay.
tentative timeframe, I really just need to know, like I said,
So-
who the subcommittee is gonna be, or who the selection committee is going to be.
Okay.
But the Board of Finance has the autonomy to make the award of the, for the audit.
All right, great. Anything else on the draft? What I wanted to mention under old business, and I have to go back to the regular meeting minutes of last month, I had brought up the workshop that I had attended by Sustainable Guilford regarding community resilience and hazard mitigation. It is my belief, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but is there a meeting, it might be a little bit late for the TV audience, but is there a meeting tomorrow?
There is a meeting tomorrow.
It's a meeting tomorrow, right? Hazard Mitigation Committee is having a presentation regarding the findings of this, or at least a preliminary set of findings based on this workshop, right? Okay. So I wanted to follow up on that because I did say that there was going to be a meeting. I'm sure that there'll be something in the paper, or reporting on it, I would hope. That's it for anything else under old business? New business? No. Public forum? I don't see anybody else, except for our trustworthy and diehard audience. Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.